Hey everybody, this is AlexMercedCoder.dev, and this is the second video in this solid start introduction series, kind of showing you how to use the different features and how to work with solid start and how to work with the frameworks. So in the first video, we kind of saw like how routing worked, how you could create a page and so forth. Now in this video, what I want to do is talk about API routes. Okay, now in other frameworks, sometimes you have like an API folder, you make the API routes here. Here, any file could also serve as API routes. Okay, so for example, okay, we have our cheese component that we created in the last, which is for like /cheese was the route. I could write API endpoints for that URL. So basically, this file just handles anything around that URL pattern /cheese. Okay, but let's say I wanted to create a route for a post request. Well, then what I would do is I would do an export default. Well, not export default. You would just do an export, and you would export an async function. And in this case, we would call it post, all uppercase. And this would be the same thing for like a put or a get. Now you can't do a get if you export a component like an actual like page component. So the fact that I'm doing an export default, that is going to be that's going to be the page that this renders. So that takes care of the get request to this URL pattern. Okay, so I can do post, and I can also do put and delete if I want to. Okay, so it would be post, put, delete. Okay, and I'm going to want them to return JSON. So what I'm going to want to do is import JSON, which is this function right here. It's going to allow us to kind of send back JSON data. Okay, and we're going to keep it real simple. Whatever it returns is the response. So I'm just going to return JSON, and then we just pass in an object in the object, and we're going to say message. This is the post route. And then I'll do the same thing here, except this will be put. And then this will be delete. Okay, so now when I start up the server, so if I start up the server, npm run dev, that starts up. We're going to see now we have an API route. So you see now not only do we have our page routes, so again, those are going to be anything in the routes folder that is a JSX file that has an export default. Okay, that component is going to be the page, and it's going to render that JSX. But we also have the API routes, in this case for post, put, and delete. Again, if I don't export default, like if I don't export a page component, then I could also do a get. So if I want to create like a get route for an API. Okay, which is how sometimes I'll still create an API folder and then just do everything in there. So that way I have like the files that handle the API separated from the pages, but you don't have to. Okay, you can actually define all a page and then define routes to go with it in the same file, which is pretty neat. Okay, but let's actually test this out. So I'm going to open up Insomnia, which is like Postman or Thunder Client. Okay, we're going to go hit up localhost 3000 /cheese. I'm going to go do a post request. Okay, and there we go. See, this is the post route. It works. Put. This is the put route. Delete. Okay, very nice. So that's pretty straightforward. Now, what if I wanted to send, like, you see here, I am actually sending a JSON body to this post route, but I'm not accessing it. So what if I want to access that body? Okay, the way you would do that, basically, first you have to like go into deconstruction. So basically, what happens is that there's going to be two things that come out of this that comes out of the main argument. One of them is going to be request. And just to show you like what comes in, let's just do this. Let's just do stuff. Okay, so we can kind of see like what stuff is in there. Okay, and then let's just console.log stuff. Okay, and now let me hit that post route again. So post. Okay, now take a look at the console log here. And you can see when we hit that, so we get the request object. So that's going to be one of the two things inside of there with all the stuff that you would want from the request. Okay, then there's going to be params if there's any params. and then there's an env object with environmental stuff that you may or may not need to use. And then there's also the fetch object if you want to use fetch. So this is basically a version of like the browser fetch function. So if you wanted to use like basically not use Ajax, or you're not necessarily using a version of Node that has like the built-in fetch and you don't want to download Node fetch, they have a version of the fetch function built in that's passed to each of these API routes that you can use. Okay, so you could grab that to use in the route. Okay, but okay, so now that we've established what's inside that argument that gets passed to each of these API routes, all I really want to grab is the request object. Okay, so I'm going to go grab the request object, and in there's a property called request.body. And the request.body is actually a readable stream. So in itself is not particularly useful. Okay, so here's what we have to do. We have to be like const body equals, and then we need to await. Do we need to await? Actually, I have a reference right over here, so let me just take a look at my reference. Remember, I always forget exactly how I set that up. Where is the example? Here it is. Yeah, await new response. There we go. Okay, because you have to take that readable stream and turn it into a response object. So basically, we're going to create a new response object, okay, which is based off like the web API. And the first argument is we have to pass the actual body to it. So we're going to pass the request body, the stream from the request body, into that. Okay, and then second, what we can do is we can pass an object that may pass any necessary headers. So let's see what happens if I don't pass the headers to it. What do I end up with? Console.log body. Okay, so again, this is going to here. So you see I'm passing this object with a message hello. I hit send. Okay, now let's see if did it get console logged. Okay, and see right now we're just console logging this response object. Okay, so we're getting the response object. Okay, but again, I forget that we want to do the .json on it too, so that way it turns it into a JSON, or parses the JSON. Okay, well let's just see, is this enough? Okay, so let me do this again. And then we head back to VS Code, and you see there we get the body. Okay, so essentially that's how you would get the body. I would just be like new response, I pass in the request.body, then I can call that JSON function, and then I'll have the body over here. And then if I want to, then I can just say, hey, instead of returning me this static version, I could just actually take the bodies in the back. Okay, so now when I do that, when I hit that post route in Insomnia, okay, what should happen is I'm going to get that message back. Hello. Okay, now if I make this cheese, I get cheese back. Okay, so simple as that. Okay, cool. Now what if I want to get params? Okay, so what if I'm dealing with params? So let's go back to our param route over here. Okay, I'm going to make a post request here. So export async function post. What I would do is I would deconstruct your params. Okay, and then we can return, and then I got bring in that JSON function. Okay, actually I could just add that to the previous import. JSON. There we go. That's better. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to say return JSON object. We're going to say we're going to have a the object, and we're going to return. Actually, we'll just return the params object as the response. Okay, even though this shouldn't be curly brackets, that should be parentheses. There we go. Okay, so now let's see what happens. Okay, and again, this is for cheese/param, meaning cheese/whatever. So theoretically, what's going to happen is I should get that object back. So let's go back to Insomnia. So I'm going to hit up local/cheese/Munster with a post request. Again, I'm doing that post request. And see, I get the param/monster because that's the params object. It's an object with all my params. Okay, and if I change this to brie, I get back free. So I can use params that way. Okay. Now, what if I want to use a query? Okay. Well, then what we'd have to do is we'll get the request back. Okay. And I think was it console.log. Let me just this console log the request object. I'm pretty sure the query is in there, but it's not in the way you think it would be. Okay, it's actually just like the raw string. So let me just hit this. Nope. Let's just close boost node for now. Okay, hit send. Go back to VS Code. Then we should see the query in the things that are here. So let's start over here. Local. We get the request method, body, Windows, URL. Yeah, so you get the URL. Okay. Path name, search params. Here we go. URL. Then you get a search params object. That's what we're going to want to use. So let me actually add some params to that. And again, the way you do a query is, again, you put a question mark at the end of the URL. We'll just say, bread equals rye. Okay, and if I want to add a second thing to it, I could just do an ampersand and say vegetable equals broccoli. So hit send. Okay, let me go back over here. Let's take a look, see if that shows up. Okay, so then see here we got the URL search params object. Okay, so again, let's take a look at that. It's going to be in URL, and then the URL is going to have a search params object. So let's try to access that. Okay, so that would be request.url. Okay, dot search params. I think is what it said there. Back to that console log. Search params. And let's see what happens if we console log that so far. Just make sure that we're getting the right thing. You always, again, that's always a thing when you're working with an object that you're not 100% sure of, like the structure of the object. You console log sort of step by step to kind of figure out what's in there. So I'm going to just do that. Now let's take a look at that news console log. See, I get undefined. So that's not exactly what I want to do then. So let's go to just request.url. Let's go back a step. Let's hit the request again. Okay, and there we get basically prints out the URL. Now I want to see what kind of methods we have available. So I'm going to change this to console.dir because I wanted to break up the object. Okay, so let's hit the post request again. Okay. Okay. That's great. Let's do request again. Request.url. Or we can just take a quick look at the docs. I don't think the docs go too deep into this particular aspect of it. And I think the reason being is because it's using the standard web API. So in that case, I'm probably going to need the MDN docs. Okay, so basically MDN response object. We can examine it from there. Response web APIs. Okay, we want to take a look at its properties, which is URL. Okay, so let's see how they use it. URL.createObject. What I want to do is grab the query. So let's just see here. Response example. Okay, so looking at the URL search params, technically I should be able to access it directly from the response object. So I think what I did, I typed it wrong, URL search Let's go back to the MDN documentation. So we see here, because see, basically I should be able to do this search params, url.search params. So url.search params. So let's see if that works. Now again, let's go to Insomnia, hit send. Then go back to here. Yeah, and I get undefined. Now if I type in url.search, that should just get me the actual query, like just that piece with the question mark right off the end of the URL. So let's see if that works. Function search. Okay, so that's a function, so we need to call it. Okay, so try that again. Okay, 0. Not what I expected. Okay, well, let's just do this. Okay. Another way we could do this is we could just say new URL search params. And then here we're supposed to pass the string URL request.url. Suppose I should be able to just do that. Okay, according to the docs. So again, I'll show you. Okay, so essentially like we would do that. Okay, but I'm not sure if it works that way here. And if I do that, symbol query, yeah, that's looking fine. There's nothing in the array. So I created the new object, but it doesn't look like anything got passed in. Let's try this. Okay, and that seemed not exactly what I wanted. Bread, rye, vegetable. Okay, so let's try this. Well, that's the URL. Let's just split it. We'll just do a dot split. We'll split it based on the question mark, and then we're going to pass in that second string, which will be index 1. That should technically pass the right thing. That's looking more like it. Okay. So now let's turn that, Control X, const query equals new user params like that. And then let's console.log query. And let's see what we get. Yeah, that was looking better. Okay, and then basically I should be able to do like a dot get and then say, hey, I want to get bread. Okay, and that should log brie. There we go. So well, that's here, rye, because that's the bread that we posted in the. So that works. So now what I should be able to do is, let's say, turn this into an object. We'll pass in params in there. Then we'll say in a query object, we all have bread, which is going to equal query.get bread. And then, what was the other query? Vegetables. Vegetable, which will be query.get vegetable. Okay, there we go. So now I should, if I go back to Insomnia, what I'm going to do is now I see there, and there we go. We have it all broken down. So that's how you can access the query and the params from the URL, depending on what you want to use in your particular API route. Okay, last thing we'll do is we'll try out that fetch function in our route. So again, I will go grab that fetch method. Okay, so you can see that I can go grab something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to const response equals fetch, and what we're going to do is we're going to fetch from that other post route from cheese. So I'm going to say slash cheese, then method post, Okay, and that's going to end up returning a response. So then we'll say const data equals response, and again we should be awaiting these. Await response.json. If I can spell response right. Okay, and then there we'll add that to our object of response. So we can see that that came in. And now let's see here, hit send. Oh, internal error. Always fun when they don't, there's no visible error. And that's one thing that needs to be worked on right now. I don't really get errors from at this point. But let's take a look. Data await response.json, that should be correct. Fetch, making a request to /cheese, that should be right. And I'm grabbing fetch from there. Okay. So that should work. Just shut off the server and turn it back on. Hit send. Nope, still doesn't like that. Let's refer to the docs, what it says about that fetch. Okay, control F, fetch. The APIs while worrying about the original. Oh, okay, so it actually might be different. We have an example of them using the fetch. The URL. Well, doesn't quite give us more information on that. Okay. But let's just console log it. Make sure that I'm destructuring it right. Console.log. Fetch. Let's get rid of data from here. And let's go back to Insomnia. Hit send. Internal fetch. Yeah, so we are getting the function. Okay. So we'll have to play with that a little bit more later. I'll see if I can find some code examples of that. But another thing to kind of point out when it comes to like API routes, right now everything we've done is like just normal API routes. What you can also do is you can create a GraphQL API. So the way you would do that, okay, is you would create like a GraphQL, in this case JS or GraphQL TS, and then you would just create this, basically this pattern here. So just to kind of show you, so we're gonna say, hey, const GraphQL, then we're passing in any like function, like basically if you ever use GraphQL, you have your schema, which is all your types, basically describing your GraphQL schema, which allows it to self-document. And then the resolvers are the functions that go with that schema. So you define any queries, any mutations, and the functions that get called are going to be there. So for example, like this is the schema saying, hey, there's only one query. There's a query called hello, which returns a string. Okay, and then this is the resolver that goes with it. Okay, so right here is the whatnot. Okay, so then here, basically, we see query. Okay, we use a GraphQL function. And again, that GraphQL function is created using this. Okay. And yeah, it just works. So like, let me see if I can do a quick example of this. And it looks like you can do it from any kind of URL you want. So let's just try that out real quick. So let's see here, we go to routes. Let's just make a new file called GraphQL.js. Okay, I'm going to copy the example. We'll kind of work backwards from there. Okay. Okay. We don't need the typings because, again, we are not using TypeScript at the moment, so I can get rid of all these type annotations. Okay, schema resolvers. Let's see here. Okay, I guess we can just use that example for now. Okay, so theoretically, the way this would work is let's make a GraphQL query. Can I do GraphQL from? Yeah. Okay, so we're going to do a GraphQL query, and this should be to localhost 3000/GraphQL should be the URL. Okay, and basically we should be able to do like hello, and then hello should be returning a property called hello just returns a string called hello world. So there is no, so it would just be hello. I wouldn't even need, I think I would need the square brackets here, since I'm not finding, there's no other properties that it comes with. So let's try that out. So again, that'd be a post request to that /GraphQL. GraphQL response preview. It just says GraphQL response. Okay. Set 200. Okay. And again, the API routes, we do have that GraphQL route. So theoretically, what should happen is that it should receive the query, realize I'm hitting the hello query because I didn't. Basically, the way like GraphQL works is if you just do curly brackets, it's going to assume query. I could also just write the word like query like this, and that would also work. Okay, and then technically it should return the string, but let's do this. Let's do type query, and let's just do this. Type, message, which is just going to be a thing that has one property, message, which is a string. Okay, and then what the hello query returns is a message. Okay, and then we're just going to say that what this returns is an object with a property called message. Okay, so essentially that's going to return an object with a property called message, which matches this type, so that's going to satisfy this query. And now I should be able to do this, and then go like that, type in message, and that should, why is it not giving me like the raw response? Visual preview. Let me try this with Postman. So again, localhost 3000/GraphQL. And we're going to send the body, which is going to be, okay, great, just been updates. GraphQL, again, query, hello, which returns a message object, and I just want the message property. Okay, hello, let's hit send, and that should be a post request. GraphQL response. What happens if I do get? Let's get GraphQL response. Interesting. Okay, yeah, that's when I was fixing those. Okay, let's just see if there's anything I'm missing here. So let's start making it implement the GraphQL. Yeah, it's detecting it. Now let me just see if I try to enter like a query that doesn't exist. So if I say hello 5, which is a query that doesn't exist, does it give me an error? Just make sure that it's actually like detecting things. I still just get GraphQL response. I am. But theoretically, that should pretty much work. And then also what you can do is you can create a RPC server, which is also really cool. I haven't tried this out yet. This I'm going to play with at a separate time and probably in a separate video because this is a little bit more complicated. But the cool thing about this is that the way RPC works, remote procedure call goes, is that what you're doing is you create this interface with the server where the client, instead of making a fetch request or a GraphQL query, you're essentially invoking a function but you're really remotely calling a function on the server. So it looks like you're calling it from the client, like you're running like any other function. But what you're doing is you're calling a function that under the hood makes the request to the server to take an action. But it makes the client side of the code feel much more imperative. So essentially right here, like just to kind of show you, like, okay, you're saying, hey, like here's the handler, here's like the endpoint, okay, and then essentially it'll do whatever. And again, you're sending the handler to that thing. But first we have to do is you have to create the client. So let's just see, like, look at the steps here. Okay, there's like a few steps to do that, but you can do that. That's the point. Okay, but that's basically like the world of API routes in Solid Start. So got a little rough there with the GraphQL and the RPC stuff I haven't really played around too much with yet. But as you can see, like there's a lot you can do. You pretty much have all this built into the framework, and it's probably going to get even more robust and easier to use as they continue working on it. But it's pretty cool. I'll see you guys in the next video where we'll talk more about using actions in Solid Start. See you guys there.